Caleb Rourke shouldn't have been in that hospital hallway. The marble floors were scuffed, fluorescent lights buzzed with a low electric hum, and the scent of antiseptic clung to everything like a second skin. He hated hospitals. They reminded him of things he tried to forget: his mother's final breath, the coldness of regret, the price of success. But that morning, a board member's wife had collapsed during brunch, and somehow Caleb, the untouchable, unreachable billionaire CEO of Rourke Technologies, had ended up here, in this godforsaken corridor, waiting for news he didn't care to hear. That was when he saw her. Tiny. Maybe 6. With tangled curls, one knee sock halfway down her shin, and a stuffed rabbit clutched tightly in her hand. She was sitting alone on a plastic chair far too big for her, swinging her feet and staring up at the ceiling like it held secrets only children could read. She didn't cry. She didn't fidget. She just waited. Caleb tried to look away. He told himself to keep walking. That she had nothing to do with him. That she, like everyone else in this place, belonged to a world of vulnerability he had carefully escaped. But then she looked at him. Straight into him. And asked, in the smallest, clearest voice he'd ever heard, "Where can I get a new heart for my mom?" Time stopped. The hallway went quiet. Caleb blinked. For a second, he thought he'd imagined it. "I'm sorry, what did you say?" His voice came out lower than he meant. Hoarse. The girl hugged her bunny tighter. "Mommy needs a new heart," she said again, with all the seriousness of someone reciting a scientific fact. "Her real one's broken. So I thought maybe someone like you would know where to get a new one. You look like someone who fixes big things." Caleb had closed billion-dollar deals. Faced cutthroat investors. Even survived a near-hostile takeover last fall. But nothing had ever shattered him like that question did. His mouth opened. No words came. And that's when the nurse appeared, frantic. "Hope. Sweetie, you can't run off like that. Oh my God, I'm so sorry, sir," she added quickly, recognizing him. Her mom's in surgery and—" "It's fine," Caleb said, too fast. His gaze was still on the girl. Hope. That was her name. He crouched slowly, until they were eye level. "Hope, is your mommy here right now?" She nodded. Her heart sick. The doctor said they might need to find a new one. But he didn't say where from. "So I thought, maybe there's a store. Or something." Caleb swallowed hard. Her innocence was like a blade, sweet and devastating. "I'm afraid it's not that easy," he said softly. "But the doctors, they're very good. They'll try their best." Hope looked down, then back up with eyes too wise for her age. Sometimes trying isn't enough. He flinched. The nurse took Hope's hand gently. "Let's go back, honey." Caleb stood up as she walked away, the little girl glancing back once before turning the corner. He should have walked out then. Gotten in his car, gone back to his glass tower on 52nd Street, buried himself in numbers and forecasts and the comfort of things that made sense. But he didn't. Instead, he asked the nurse for her name. Her mother's name. Her room number. And when she hesitated, surprised, he added simply, "I want to help." 3 hours later, Caleb sat in his penthouse, staring out over Manhattan's twilight skyline, but all he could see were Hope's eyes and the question that would not stop echoing. "Where can I get a new heart for my mom?" He Googled. Called 2 surgeons he knew by association. Had his assistant track down one of the top transplant cardiologists in the country. All while ignoring the dinner reservation he'd made with an investor's daughter. He didn't even bother sending a text to cancel. That night, he drank whiskey and read about peripartum cardiomyopathy until his vision blurred. He didn't know why he cared. He didn't do children. Or hospitals. Or hope, ironically. But something about the way that little girl had looked at him, like he was a god who might know the way back from the dark, had cracked something open inside him. Something he thought had long since died. The next morning, he returned to the hospital. He wore jeans. No assistant, no entourage. Just him. The nurse from before recognized him immediately. "You came back," she said, clearly stunned. "I want to speak with her doctor." "They're busy right now." "I'll wait." The nurse hesitated, then nodded. Hope appeared a few minutes later. Her bunny had a band-aid now. She beamed when she saw him. "I knew you'd come back," she said, like it was obvious. Caleb blinked again, not used to being on the receiving end of such innocent faith. "How's your mom?" he asked. "She's sleeping," Hope said. "They said her heart is very tired." And then, almost whispering, "If she goes to heaven, will she take me with her?" That question broke him in a different way. What would you do if a stranger's child asked you a question that cracked your soul wide open? Tell me in the comments. Has a moment with a child ever changed your life or perspective? If you're hooked in and you're enjoying this story, click subscribe and let me know in the comments where you're watching from, because tomorrow, I will be giving you another story just as interesting as this one. And you don't want to miss it. Let's continue. Celia Navarro wasn't supposed to wake up yet. But she did, disoriented, in pain, and furious the moment she realized her daughter wasn't in the room. She reached for the call button and pressed it hard. Moments later, a nurse stepped in, surprised. "Dr. Navarro, you're awake early. Where's Hope?" "She's just down the hall. She wandered off again, but she's safe. A visitor kept her company." Celia's heart stopped for a beat, not in the medical sense, but in the protective mother sense. "A visitor," she repeated sharply. The nurse hesitated. "He's someone important. A Mr. Caleb Rourke." Celia's eyes narrowed. That name she knew. Everyone did. The Caleb Rourke. Billionaire CEO of Rourke Technologies. Disruptor. Wall Street's golden boy. Rumored to eat ethics for breakfast and bury competition by lunch. What the hell was he doing talking to her daughter? "Bring her here," Celia demanded. "Now." Hope skipped into the room 5 minutes later, bunny in hand, cheeks flushed. "Hi, Mommy," she chirped. He came back. Celia's lips tightened. "I can see that." Because there he was, tall, ridiculously good-looking, wearing the kind of casual jeans and Henley shirt that screamed effortless wealth. And standing awkwardly by the door like a man who wasn't used to being looked at with suspicion. "Dr. Navarro," he said, nodding. "I'm Caleb Rourke." "I know who you are," Celia said, her voice cool. He looked at Hope, then back at her. "I met your daughter yesterday. She asked me where she could get a new heart for her mom." Celia closed her eyes briefly. That sounded like something Hope would say. She was too smart for her own good, and far too trusting. "I appreciate your concern," she said evenly, "but we're not a charity case." "I didn't say you were." "You're here. That says enough." Hope looked between them, confused. "Mommy, he's nice." Celia smiled tightly at her daughter. "Sweetheart, can you go with the nurse for a bit? I need to talk to Mr. Rourke." Hope pouted but obeyed. Once the door clicked shut, Celia looked at Caleb again, this time with the full force of a woman who had fought too hard to survive alone. "I don't know what you want," she said, "but I'm not interested. And neither is my daughter." Caleb raised his hands. "I understand how this looks. But I'm not here for anything other than to help." "Why?" That stopped him. Why? He didn't know how to explain it without sounding unhinged. That something about Hope's voice, her eyes, the raw need in her had reached into a part of him he thought was dead. "She reminded me of someone," he said finally. "Someone I lost a long time ago." Celia's expression didn't soften. "Mr. Rourke, with all due respect, I've worked too hard to protect Hope from false hope. If you're here out of guilt or boredom or some savior fantasy, don't be." "This isn't a fantasy," Caleb said quietly. "I'm not offering miracles. But I can offer resources. Connections. Options your insurance might not." Celia looked away. Her body ached. Her heart literally struggled to pump. And her pride, her damn pride, was all that had kept them afloat for the last 7 years. "You think throwing money at this will fix it?" "No," Caleb said. "But it might keep your daughter from asking strangers for a new heart in a hallway." That hurt. It was a low blow, but an honest one. She exhaled shakily. "I don't want Hope to owe anyone anything." "She won't," he said. "Whatever I do, she'll never know it was me. If that's what you want." Celia looked up, surprised. That wasn't the response she expected. Caleb didn't blink. Didn't smirk. He wasn't flirting. He wasn't posturing. He was sincere. And that scared her more than anything else. 2 days later, Celia found herself in a meeting with the hospital's transplant coordinator, who mysteriously now had direct access to a Stanford surgeon, a Mayo Clinic research lead, and a private donor network that had never returned her calls before. She knew who to thank. She didn't. But every time she saw Caleb in the hallway, with Hope talking to him like he was made of stardust, her resolve cracked a little more. Meanwhile, Caleb couldn't stay away. He told himself he was just checking in. But the truth was, he found himself drawn back more and more, for Hope's stories, for her silly riddles, for the way she made him laugh in a way he hadn't in years. And for Celia. Strong, brilliant, defensive as hell, and so clearly used to doing everything alone that she didn't know what to do with someone simply standing beside her. One night, Hope was asleep in the corner of the hospital room, and Caleb brought Celia tea. Real tea. Not from the vending machine. She blinked. "Where'd you get this?" "Had it delivered. You looked like you needed something that didn't taste like cardboard." She took it, wary. Sipped. Then sighed. "Okay. That's dangerously good." He smiled. "Small victories." There was a pause. Then she said, more softly than before, "Why are you really here?" He looked at her. No suits. No pretense. Just a man unraveling in quiet pieces. "Because for the first time in a long time, I care about something that doesn't have a dollar sign attached to it." That landed heavy in the room. And Celia didn't answer, because her heart was already betraying her. Have you ever pushed someone away because you were afraid to need them? Drop a heart if you've ever been Celia, fighting alone, even when help finally showed up. 3 weeks later, Celia Navarro's name still hadn't moved on the transplant list. Her body had. Downhill. She could feel it, in the shortness of breath, the tremor in her fingers, the way her legs barely carried her down the hospital corridor without giving out. But she hid it. She always hid it. Except Caleb Rourke saw everything. She hated that. And needed it too. Caleb sat in the hospital cafeteria with his laptop open, fingers still on the trackpad even though he hadn't moved in 10 minutes. His food was cold. His eyes were distant. Across from him sat his executive assistant, Noelle, who'd flown in that morning after Caleb canceled 2 board meetings and pushed back a $9 million acquisition. "You're spiraling," Noelle said calmly. "I'm thinking." "You're losing it," she corrected. "You're not a doctor, you're not God, and you're definitely not a heart match." Caleb's voice dropped. "I'm not letting her die." Noelle stared. "You barely knew this woman 3 weeks ago." "She's not just a woman," he said. "She's Hope's mother." "And what are you, Caleb?" "Her fairy godfather." He slammed the laptop shut. "I'm not leaving them alone." Noelle sighed, softer now. "You really want to cross that line?" Caleb's jaw clenched. Because the truth was, he already had. That night, Celia was wheeled into observation after nearly collapsing in the bathroom. Her heart had gone into arrhythmia. They stabilized her. Barely. Hope cried in the hallway, gripping Caleb's hand so tight it turned purple. "Is Mommy gonna die?" she whispered. Caleb knelt to her level. "No. I promise you, I won't let that happen." And he meant it. Even if it meant crossing the line between legal and desperate. 2 days later, Celia awoke to find her bed moved. New room. Private. Upgraded. She blinked at the softer light, the fresher air. Even the sheets smelled new. "What is this?" she asked the nurse groggily. The nurse smiled awkwardly. Mr. Rourke arranged for a transfer to the advanced cardiac suite. All approved through administration. No cost to you. Celia sat up too fast, heart hammering. "No," she snapped. "I didn't approve this." "You were unconscious." She struggled to stand. "Take me back. I don't want his money. I didn't ask for this." The nurse hesitated. "Dr. Navarro, if I may? You didn't have to ask. He cares." Celia found Caleb in the hallway, looking like he hadn't slept in days. She didn't yell. That was worse. "Why are you doing this?" she asked quietly. "You can't buy my life." He looked at her with exhaustion in his eyes. "I'm not trying to buy anything." "Then stop. Just stop. I've handled worse than this. I don't need you." But even as she said it, her body trembled. And he saw. "I know you don't need me," he said gently. "But hope does." Celia's lips parted. The wound invisible, but deep. "Don't you dare use my daughter to justify this," she whispered. "She already lost one parent. I won't let her get attached to someone who'll disappear when it gets hard." "I'm not going anywhere," Caleb said. "You will. You all do." That silenced him. Because he had disappeared once. Before this. In another life. From someone who also needed him. And he'd never forgiven himself. That night, Caleb sat in the parking garage in his car, alone, staring at his phone. He opened a secure messaging app and sent a name to a contact listed only as E. Find out who's at the top of the O+ transplant list in state. Quietly. He stared at the screen. A minute passed. "You sure about this?" came the reply. "If it saves her, yes. Even if it broke every rule. Even if it broke her trust." 3 days later, Caleb stood in front of Celia's hospital bed. She looked worse. Paler. Breathier. Her lips tinged blue when she fell asleep. She opened her eyes slowly. "Still here." He sat down. "Always." Her voice was a whisper. "I don't want Hope to remember me like this." "She won't. She already does." They didn't talk for a while. Then Caleb said, "What if someone made sure you were next?" Celia's head turned sharply. "What?" "Just, hypothetically. If someone pulled strings. Made a call." "That's illegal," she said instantly. "You'd be breaking every law in transplant ethics." "What if no one ever found out?" She stared at him, then sat up despite her weakness. "You didn't." "I haven't done anything," Caleb interrupted quickly. "Yet." "Don't," she said. "Don't you dare. I'd rather die than cut in line for someone who needs it more." "You're dying now." "I'm choosing integrity." He stood. Angry. Pained. What good is integrity in a grave? What good is a heart if I have to live knowing someone else was skipped because I had a rich man's favor? Her words hit like bullets. And he stepped back like he'd been shot. He didn't come the next day. Or the day after. Hope asked for him. Celia had no answer. She lay in bed, weaker than ever, wondering if she'd finally pushed him away. And why that hurt more than the illness ever did. 1 week later, Celia was rushed into emergency prep. A heart had come. No warning. No fanfare. Just a stunned surgeon who said, "You're next." Celia cried when they wheeled her away, not from fear, but from disbelief. She wasn't supposed to get this lucky. When she woke up hours later, groggy and alive, she looked at the ceiling and whispered the only name on her mind. Caleb. But he wasn't there. Because he was standing on a beach an hour outside the city, hands in his pockets, watching the water roll in. Noelle stood beside him. "She doesn't know?" "No. Are you going to tell her?" He shook his head. "She got her miracle. That's all she needs." Noelle studied him. "You broke every rule for a woman who told you not to." "I didn't break them," Caleb said. Pause. "I bent them." She rolled her eyes. "You're a mess." "I know." Back in recovery, Celia read the report on the donor. Confidential. Anonymous. Only a hint, the donor family had agreed last minute to a private reassignment. No bribes. No proof. But something in her gut told her who had bent the stars. She closed the file and looked out the window, tears in her eyes. Not from pain. But from the terrifying realization that someone had cared more than she had ever let herself believe possible. The sun outside Celia's hospital room was too bright. Her new heart beat steadily now, a miracle encased in flesh. But inside, everything still felt wrong. Because Caleb Rourke hadn't come back. Not once since the transplant. It had been 11 days since the surgery. She was recovering faster than expected. The nurses called her a miracle case. Hope clung to her side like her shadow, drawing butterflies and hearts in her notebook. But every time the door opened, Celia's chest tightened, expecting him. It never was. Until one afternoon, while Hope was napping in the chair beside her, the door creaked open. And he was finally there. He looked thinner. Palest blue shirt. No tie. Eyes tired. Like he hadn't slept since the day she went under. Celia didn't speak right away. She didn't need to. Her eyes did. You left. He saw it. Felt it. I didn't want to interfere, he said quietly. Her voice was soft. I didn't want you gone. Silence stretched between them. You got your heart, he said. That's what matters. She nodded once. Then asked the question she'd been afraid to voice. Did you do something to make that happen? He didn't answer right away. And that silence said everything. Celia closed her eyes. I told you not to. I didn't pay anyone, he said quickly. I didn't force anything. All I did was make sure they looked at your chart again. Urgently. She opened her eyes again. Calm. And how many names did they skip to get to mine? He looked away. Enough, she whispered. I did it for Hope, he said. Her eyes glistened. No, Caleb. You did it for me. He took a slow breath. I'm not a good man, Celia. Not really. I've paid people off. Bought silence. Won court battles I never should have. I've made people disappear. A long pause. But I've never done something that felt this selfish and right at the same time. He looked at her, broken open. I couldn't let you die. Celia was quiet. Not because she was angry, but because her heart, the one he saved, ached in her chest. Caleb, she said slowly, you gave me a life I might not have deserved. He stepped forward. You deserved it. Don't ever say you didn't. She shook her head, emotional. You crossed a line for me. I know. You could lose everything. I already have, he said quietly, eyes on her. You. The next morning, Hope woke up early and tiptoed to the nurse's desk with a crayon drawing in her hand. Can you give this to the tall man? She asked. The nurse blinked. What tall man, sweetie? The one who brought my mommy's heart. That night, Celia was discharged. She held Hope's hand as they stepped out into the late afternoon light. The hospital behind her. The unknown ahead. And just as she reached the pickup zone, a familiar black SUV rolled to a slow stop. The window lowered. Caleb was in the driver's seat. I didn't want you walking out of there alone, he said. She smiled faintly. I never was. He drove them to a quiet overlook above the city. Sunset was pouring gold over the skyline. Hope fell asleep in the back seat. And Celia, finally, turned to him. Open. Vulnerable. Why me, Caleb? Why did you care so much? He was quiet a long time. My mother died waiting for a heart, he said. I was 13. I watched her fade. Nobody came. No miracle. No donor. Just death. He exhaled hard. And the first time I saw Hope ask about your heart, it was like seeing myself again. Wanting someone to live. But this time, I could do something. She reached for his hand. And he let her. They sat in silence, their fingers intertwined, hearts speaking louder than words. You saved me, she whispered. He shook his head. No. You saved me. You reminded me I'm still human. Have you ever broken your own rules for someone you loved? Comment below, was Caleb right to do what he did, or did he go too far? 3 weeks later, everything unraveled. It began with a whisper. A sentence buried inside a blog post. A source close to the transplant committee leaked a name. Celia Hart. A single mother. No political ties. No high-profile diagnosis. Yet she'd received a donor heart that had been matched to a congressman's wife just days earlier. It should have stopped there. But it didn't. Because a junior journalist from a click-hungry tabloid chased the story. And then a real reporter picked it up. And then, the floodgates opened. CEO Caleb Rourke used power to jump girlfriend up donor list. Millionaire buys heart for single MOM. Who did he push down the list? By the time Celia read the headlines, it was too late. There were reporters on her lawn. Parents at Hope's school whispering. And the hospital had already issued a statement distancing themselves from alleged misconduct. The phone calls wouldn't stop. Neither would the threats. Inside her tiny apartment, Celia stood frozen in front of the television as the story played across national news. A panel of experts debated the ethics. A grieving mother sobbed about how her daughter had died waiting. A former nurse suggested special favors might have been involved. They plastered Celia's photo across the screen, and worse hopes. "She's being painted like some gold-digging mistress who conned her way into a heart," said her best friend Mina, pacing behind her. "She wasn't even dating him when it happened," Celia whispered, numb. "But you are now," Mina said gently. Celia closed her eyes. That night, Hope cried herself to sleep after a little boy at school asked if her mom stole someone's heart and killed them. Celia tucked her in, kissed her forehead, then sat in the dark living room, staring at nothing. And when her phone rang, she almost didn't answer. But it was Caleb. "I can fix this," he said immediately. "No," she said, her voice brittle. "You can't. I'll go public, take the blame. I'll protect you." "You already protected me," she whispered. "That's the problem." He was quiet for a moment. Then, "They're investigating me, Celia. My company. My board. My licensing. If they prove I leaned on the transplant system, you'll lose everything." "I don't care about that." She exhaled shakily. "But I do." The next morning, she called a press conference. Her voice shook as she faced the cameras. "No one paid for my transplant. No one forged my name or falsified my diagnosis. What happened was wrong. I shouldn't have been pushed to the front of the list. There are people who waited longer than me, who had families just as desperate." She swallowed hard. "And I'm sorry." The fallout was instant. Online hate turned ferocious. She lost her job at the local arts center. Mothers stopped arranging playdates. Strangers threw coffee at her car. The worst part? Caleb didn't call. He vanished from her world without a trace. One night, Mina came over and found Celia on the floor of the kitchen, knees pulled to her chest. "I told myself I wouldn't fall for him," Celia whispered. "I know," Mina said softly, kneeling beside her. "I should have died. Then at least nobody else would have had to suffer." "Don't you dare," Mina said, voice steel. "You think Hope would rather be motherless than hated for a few months by people who don't know you?" Celia didn't answer. She couldn't. Because every part of her felt broken. Not just from the public shame, but because she hadn't just lost her privacy. She'd lost Caleb. Across the city, in a dark conference room, Caleb Rourke stood alone, watching his own board vote him out. "This is for the integrity of the company," one director said gently. "You're a liability," said another. He didn't argue. He didn't fight. He just nodded once, and walked away. "Because the truth was," he agreed. The next day, he walked into a church. It was empty, except for the priest lighting candles near the altar. "I don't pray," Caleb said. "I don't believe in anything I can't control." The priest looked at him. "Sometimes we pray not because we believe," he said, "but because we're finally ready to let go." Caleb stared at the flickering candles. And for the first time in decades, he sat down and let himself grieve. His mother. His mistakes. Celia. What would you have done in Celia's place? Stayed quiet, or told the truth? Leave a comment. Who deserves forgiveness? And who crossed the line? The world didn't stop spinning just because their lives did. Bills kept coming. Hope kept needing dinner. And Celia kept waking up each morning with the same weight on her chest, not her donor heart, but the shame of being seen as unworthy of it. She tried to keep busy. Applied for jobs. Avoided the internet. Deleted every photo of Caleb from her phone. But forgetting him was harder than she'd expected. Not because of the scandal. Not even because of the love. But because every time Hope laughed, really laughed, she sounded exactly like she had that day in a hospital, when she asked for a new heart for her mom. And Caleb Rourke had looked at her like the world cracked open. Meanwhile, Caleb drifted. He left the city. Rented a cabin upstate. No internet. No interviews. Just silence. He chopped wood. Cooked simple meals. Walked through forests with no destination. But the guilt never left. He'd told himself he did the right thing. That moving Celia up the list wasn't corruption, it was justice. She was a mother. A fighter. A woman worth saving. But in trying to play God, he'd become something worse. A man who lost everything good in the process. Then one night, he saw her on TV again. A journalist had tracked Celia down for a follow-up piece. She stood on the steps of a small community center, flanked by volunteers. "I can't undo what happened," she said simply, "but I can try to give back." She'd started a non-profit, the Hope Fund, to raise awareness about organ donation inequities, and to help families navigate the transplant process. She looked stronger, softer, a little more tired, but a lot more determined. And for the first time in months, Caleb felt something other than regret. He felt proud of her. The next day, he packed up and drove back to the city. Celia was in the middle of organizing a fundraiser when he walked through the doors. She looked up and froze. He was thinner, paler, but his eyes, those unrelenting storm-blue eyes, hadn't changed. "Hi," he said softly. "I thought you disappeared." "I did. I thought you didn't care anymore." "I did, too much." Silence stretched between them. Then she said, "What do you want, Caleb?" He hesitated. "I want to help." She looked skeptical. "You think money can fix this?" "No. I think you can. I just want to stand beside you this time, not behind the scenes, not pulling strings. Just beside you." She should have said no. Should have told him to leave. But the truth was, her heart, her real one, had never stopped beating for him. So she nodded. "Then roll up your sleeves, Rourke. We've got flyers to fold." At the end of one long night, Celia found him on the community center roof, staring at the skyline. She handed him coffee. "You're not used to being told what to do, are you?" she teased. "Not really," he smiled. Then his face turned serious. "I never asked for forgiveness. And I never offered it." He looked away. "But maybe," she added quietly, "we don't need forgiveness to start over. Maybe we just need honesty." He turned to her, eyes full. "I loved you," he said. She swallowed. "I still do." And for the first time since the scandal, since the heartbreak, they kissed. Not like lovers chasing fantasy, but like survivors, clinging to truth. Can love survive betrayal, even if it came from a place of sacrifice? Comment below, would you give him a second chance? The night of the gala arrived like a page out of a fairy tale. The community center had never looked more alive. Candles flickered in mason jars, fairy lights twinkled overhead, and laughter hummed in the air like a second heartbeat. Celia wore a simple black gown. Her curls pinned, lips bold. The donor scar on her chest, visible and unapologetically hers. Hope wore glitter sneakers with her dress and insisted on helping at the welcome table, handing out pins that read "Be a Heart Hero." Caleb looked at her from across the room, eyes tender. He hadn't touched her since the rooftop kiss. Hadn't pushed. Hadn't tried to claim her back. But every time their eyes met, it was there, the silent electricity of something rebuilding itself from ashes. They were halfway through the auction when it happened. A man stood up at the back of the room. Clean suit. 2 white teeth. And an oily smile Celia hadn't seen in years. "Sorry to interrupt," he said, holding up a drink. "But I have a donation to make, in the form of the truth." Celia froze. Caleb turned. It was Bryce Marlin, her ex, Hope's absentee father. The man who left Celia when her diagnosis came in and hadn't looked back. "You know," Bryce said, turning to the crowd, "a lot of you donated tonight thinking this was some feel-good redemption story. A woman who beat the odds. A kid who believed in miracles. But here's the thing, miracles don't need backroom deals, do they?" A murmur rippled through the room. "I have documents," he said, holding up a folder. "Proof that this entire transplant was a VIP override. That Celia Moreno skipped the line. That Caleb Rourke, Mr. Morality himself, bought her a second chance." Cameras flashed. Voices rose. Hope began to cry. Caleb stepped forward. "Leave." "Why?" Bryce smirked. "Afraid they'll find out the truth." "The truth," Celia said, voice cutting through the chaos like a blade, "is that you didn't show up when I was dying. And you don't get to show up now that I've survived." Bryce sneered. "You're not a hero. You're a leech." And he pointed at Caleb, is a fraud. And then, crack. A flashbulb. A gasp. A shove. Caleb stepped between Bryce and Celia just as Bryce's fist flew. Blood. Panic. Security. Police. It all happened so fast, Celia barely registered the chaos, only Caleb's hand gripping hers tightly before he was led outside. The next morning, the story hit every outlet. Tech billionaire assaults guest at charity gala amid organ transplant scandal. Celia Moreno, symbol of hope or manipulated beneficiary? Exclusive, the donor list that sparked an ethical firestorm. Donations plummeted. Volunteers quit. The board threatened to dissolve the nonprofit unless Celia stepped down. And Celia? She sat in her tiny apartment, head in her hands, watching the life she built burn all over again. Caleb showed up 2 days later. His eye was bruised. His suit wrinkled. But his resolve? Steel. I'm holding a press conference, he said. I'm telling them everything. On record. Celia looked up, hollow. Why? It won't save me. No, he said. But maybe it'll save the next person who needs help and doesn't have a billionaire in their corner. The conference aired live. Caleb stood behind a podium and told the world the full, ugly truth. I did it, he said. I moved her name up. I used a personal favor. Not because I wanted to break the rules, but because the rules are already broken. He talked about the flaws in the system, the racial disparities, the algorithm bias, the price of silence. I'm stepping down as CEO of Rourke Innovations. I'm liquidating half my shares. And I'm donating everything to the Hope Fund, under new leadership. He looked straight at the camera. At the center of this story is not corruption. It's love. And if loving someone enough to risk everything is a crime, then I'll wear the handcuffs myself. Public reaction was complicated. Some called him a hero. Others called for prosecution. But what no one could deny was the way Celia refused to disappear. She returned to the boardroom. Refused to step down. Released her own statement. My life was saved through unjust means, she said. But I won't let that become the end of my story, or the beginning of someone else's death. And something incredible happened. Donors came back. Small ones. Grassroots. People who heard their own struggles in her voice. And the Hope Fund exploded. 1 year later. The new office overlooked the city skyline. Hope had her own desk. Caleb no longer wore suits. He ran a new platform, ListLift, an open-source system for making wait lists transparent. And Celia? She stood on a stage, receiving the Heart Hero Humanitarian Award, flanked by Mina and a very proud Hope. She began her speech, hands trembling slightly. When I was sick, I asked the universe for one more day. Then one more after that. I didn't ask to be loved. I didn't ask for a scandal. I only wanted to live long enough to see my daughter grow up. She paused, smiling at Hope. But the universe gave me more than days. It gave me a reason. A cause. And somehow, a second chance at love too. Caleb, seated in the front row, met her eyes. And in that look, the whole story shimmered, not as a tragedy, but as a transformation. Celia, Hope, and Caleb walk through a park at sunset. Hope runs ahead, chasing butterflies. Caleb takes Celia's hand. What now? He asks. She smiles. Now we live. For real this time. Share this story with someone who believes in second chances.
Thank you for watching this story to the end. If you enjoyed this story, you will surely love the next one. It's as crazier and more intriguing as you can ever imagine. So do check it out. Click on the image showing on your screen right now to watch the next one.